Well, welcome to the Cinnabar. Now today we're going to do things a little bit differently. Instead of focusing on one particular type of firearm, we're going to focus on a cartridge, and one that was only chambered in Winchester rifles for a short time, from the early 1930s to the early 1950s. We're talking about the 218B, a cartridge that can trace its roots all the way back to the 1873 Winchesters. You see, the parent cartridge is the 3220, and of course it got necked down into the 1892s to a 2520, and then later on to this 218B cartridge, which was the 22 caliber version of the 3220. Now, that cartridge was only offered by Winchester in two different rifles, and very different from each other. Now, the first one was the Model 65 Winchester, which is just the latest variant of the John Browning designed 1892. And these 65s are wonderful little guns. They're kind of almost a lightweight version of the 92. Pistol grip stock, pistol grip finger lever, shotgun butt, steel butt plate, half magazine. Came in originally with a 22-inch barrel, but when they came out with these 218Bs, they came out with a 24-inch barrel. Okay, and then when the 65 got discontinued in about 1948, then Winchester took the 218B and chambered it in a very different rifle, a bolt action version with a Model 43, which is just a fantastic little rifle. Again, just a kind of a lightweight lever action, a bolt action in varmint calibers. Again, it was available in the 2520, 3220, and 218B, and then they added another varmint caliber, and we'll get to that when we really get into depth here. But first, let's take a little closer look at this 65 and talk a little bit about it, and put a few rounds through it and just see how it shoots. And don't forget discount code Cinnabar2023 for 15% off all orders at our sponsor Old Arms of Idaho through the end of this year. Now, if you've never handled one of these Model 65s, you're really missing out. But of course, not a lot of people get an opportunity to handle these because they didn't make many of them. You see, they came out in 1933 in the very depths of the Depression. And of course, firearm sales were pretty low at that time. Now, they came out, I think I mentioned, in 2520 and 3220. Sales were very flagging. You know, those were cartridges that had been available in the Model 92 for decades. And it wasn't until Winchester introduced that 218B varmint version that the sales kind of started to take off. And they did that in 1937. And by the end of production in 1948, the 218Bs had accounted for over 50% of the sales. So the 2520, I think, was the least popular. 3220, and between the two of them, they made up less than 50% of the sales, and more than 50% was in the 218B. Now, one of the interesting things is usually when there's less of a certain cartridge made, that kind of drives up the value. But in the case of the Model 65, it's the 218Bs, which are the most common, that are the most valuable and the most sought after today. Now, the production numbers are a little hard to trace because they were serialized concurrently with the 92s. So we don't know exactly how many of them were made. And a lot of the literature says around 5,700 in that area. My good friend Bert Hartman is doing a survey of these 65s. And if you have one, send him the information on yours, because it would be very much appreciated. And you can find Bert on the Winchester Arms Collectors Association forum, or several other forums for that matter. But Bert thinks that based on his survey, there's probably a couple thousand more of them, maybe up around 7,700 of these rifles. The 218B came out with a 46 grain bullet, traveled at about 2,700 feet per second. Now, by varmint rifle standards today, that's pretty slow. But at that time, there wasn't a lot of varmint rifles out there. Most people were using rimfire 22s for varmints. So this became a popular version. Now, I don't believe I've ever shot this particular rifle, before we get too far along, let's see how it shoots. And then we'll talk about that Model 43. Now in 1937, when Winchester introduced the 218B and the 65s, they also made the bolt peep sight, the 98C bolt peep sight available, and this particular one had that at one time. We can see that the bolt has been grooved for it, but there's a broken screw in there, so I think they were a little fragile, and I think this one got broke off. Winchester also offered an option of the Lyman number 56 or the Redfield number 70 receiver sight, and this one's got the Redfield number 70. And like a lot of them do, we've got a flip up number 6 Lyman that probably didn't come on it from the factory, but somebody probably put that on just for another option. Now I don't load for 218B, so I'm shooting some factory Winchester loads today. We've got 5 rounds in here. We're just gonna put 5 shots on paper and see where it's shooting. Okay, let's go see how we did. Okay, so I have to admit I'm a little disappointed off a bench rest at 50 yards. I was kind of hoping it would group up a little better. You can see top to bottom here, we've got just a shade under 2-inch group at 50 yards. We got all 5 of them right in here. You know, I guess if it's a varmint gun, it's going to have to be a big varmint. Now, many times I've heard the Model 43 described as poor man's Model 70, which really gives us the impression that a 43 is nothing more than a scaled down Model 70. But when we look at a 43 like we have here in front, compared to a pre-64 Model 70 here, we can see that there are far more differences than similarities. Of course, we start off with a detachable magazine in the 43s, and of course we have a floor plate here that opens on the Model 70, but certainly not a detachable magazine. Look at the configuration of the bolt is completely different. While they're both Winchesters, they're both bolt actions, were made about the same time, they really don't have much else in common. But if we do bring up another Winchester of the period, this being a Model 75 Winchester, this is a 22 caliber rimfire. We see that we have striking similarities. And look at the configuration of the bolt, you know, detachable magazine, very similar. So instead of considering the 43 as a scaled down Model 70, we really could consider it a scaled up version of the bolt action 22s, of the 69A and the 75s like this one is, and in one of the few instances where a manufacturer scaled up a 22 rimfire to a centerfire cartridge. Now, when Winchester stopped producing the Model 65, it was in favor of these Model 43s, and they chambered them in the same cartridges, our 218B, 2520, 3220, as were in the 65s. And then they added another cartridge, which is a little bit mystifying because it's very similar to the 218B, the 22 Hornet. And the 22 Hornet actually became the biggest seller in the Model 43 lineup. These were much more popular than the 65s, sold a lot more. They you know, where the 65s sold maybe close to 8,000, I think there was around 70,000 of these 43s sold. And when they discontinued the Model 43 in 1953, then the 218B, the 2520, and the 3220 went away. Marched off into history. The 22 Hornet, it did stick around, and of course 22 Hornet's a pretty popular round even today. Now, I shot kind of poorly with that 65, so now I'm looking forward to maybe redeeming myself with this 43. Let's see how it goes. Okay, so let's see how this 43 shoots. This will be kind of a treat. I rarely shoot scoped rifles anymore. Okay, so the magazine only holds 3. I had one in the chambers. To get our 5th, we're going to have to hand load the last. Single load, I should say. Okay, now both of these rifles have pristine bores, so I'm very hopeful that between the scope on this one and being in such nice shape that it'll shoot a little bit better than that 65. Let's go see. Okay, well that's certainly a little more like it, and it took me a little bit when I first walked up here. I can only see 4 holes, but this one's a little bit wider than the other, so there's 2 shots in that hole. So we're looking at about maybe just a shade over 3/4 of an inch group there. So that's a much better group than what we got with that 65. Alright, since these are varmint guns, of course we're going to have to take a few longer range shots with them. We've got a couple of milk jugs out here at just under 150 yards. It's going to be a real challenge for this 65, and I hope it doesn't take too many shots because I can't afford this 218B ammo. So hope a whole bunch of people watch. Maybe I can get enough ad revenue to pay for the ammo here. Yeah, it covers up the whole front sight, or the front sight covers it up. Over the top. Over the top again. Gonna have to shoot at the base. Hey, drilled it. 3rd shot. Well, I didn't waste too much ammo. Okay, so let's see with this Model 43. I don't think I hit it. Scared the heck out of it though. I don't know how I'm missing it. It looks like the dust is coming right up off of the jug. I was worried about the 65 hitting it. There we go. Alright, well those milk jugs kind of approximate a big old fat rock chuck, so next spring when the rock chucks come out, I'll know which gun to grab. Actually, I'll grab both of them. Well, it kind of stinks being your own cameraman and, well, being kind of old and forgetful. I was pretty proud of myself for not wasting ammo and hitting these things, and you probably heard the hits, but it's not the same as seeing them. See, I forgot to turn on the backup camera, so we're going to try this again. Don't want you to have to take my word for it. And besides, it's just a lot of fun. Okay. Drilled it first time. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, now that we got the range with that one, and that one was full, but we're only going to take one shot with this one too. Let's see, it was shooting a little low. I need to shoot a little bit higher. Hey! Didn't waste too much ammo. 2 shots and 2 jugs killed. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today. Now, if you have an interest in learning more about either the Model 43 or the Model 65, check out the I think it's the winter 2016 and the spring 2016 editions of the Winchester Collector magazine, available from the Winchester Arms Collectors Association. If you join up as a member, you get access to all those back issues all the way back. Now, Bert Hartman, my good friend up in Washington State, did these articles on both these models and those back-to-back issues, and they're just fantastic, just chock full of information. So join up with the Winchester Arms Collectors Association and check out those articles and all the rest of the articles in those magazines. You'll have more information you never dreamed of. So thanks for joining us today. It's been a pleasure shooting these old girls. Thankfully we found the range on them old milk jugs out there. Until next time, happy trails from the Cinnabar.